السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. صبحكم الله بالخير جميعا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. نرحب بكم في هذا الصباح الجميل، وأسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يجعله مباركا وأن يجعله موفقا للجميع، وأن نستفيد منه بقدر المستطاع. ترحب بكم الغرفة التجارية الصناعية بالرياض، ممثلة في مجلس إدارتها ولجنة الأوقاف في الغرفة التجارية في هذا اللقاء. هذا اللقاء بإذن الله عز وجل سيكون عن نموذج التكافل القائم على الوقف. ونبدأ بإذن الله هذا اللقاء بكلمة رئيس لجنة الأوقاف وعضو مجلس إدارة الغرفة التجارية بالرياض الأستاذ عبد الله العجلان.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سعادة الدكتور جيرمان رود ريجانس، الحضور الكريم، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يسعدني أن أرحب بكم جميعا في هذا اللقاء الذي يسرنا أن نستمع فيه إلى سعادة الدكتور جيرمان، المتخصص في التمويل الإسلامي بمعهد للاعمال في إسبانيا، حيث سيحاضر حول دور الأوقاف ونظام التكافل في ريادة الأعمال ضمن سلسلة تجارب محلية ودولية ناجحة في الأوقاف، التي درجت لجنة الأوقاف بالغرفة على تنظيمها من أجل تشجيع ثقافة الوقف الإسلامي بالمملكة وتعزيز هذه السنة المباركة وتفعيل دورها الاجتماعي، باعتبارها من أبرز فضائل الإسلام والنهوض بآليات وقيم التكافل الاجتماعي. كما سيركز المحاضر على دور هذه الأوقاف في النهوض بريادة الأعمال. وفي الختام يطيب لنا أن نكرر الترحيب بسعادة الدكتور جيرمان ونشكر له على استجابته لدعوة الغرفة واللجنة، آملين الاستفادة القصوى من هذه المحاضرة وأن تسهم في بناء بيئة أفضل لمشاريع أوقاف أكثر نفعا للمملكة والمجتمعات الإسلامية. فليتفضل محاضرنا بإلقاء كلمته، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
طيب، نستأذنكم بس في مقدمة بسيطة لهذا اللقاء. أول شيء نعتذر منكم اليوم لأنه القاعة الرئيسية فيها إصلاحات، فلذلك الترجمة ستكون ترجمة فورية بالصوت وليست كما هو المعتاد أن تكون الترجمة بالسماعات. فهذه النقطة الأولى اللي أحببت التنبيه إليها. ستكون المحاضرة بإذن الله عز وجل 45 دقيقة سيتكلم فيها المحاضر عن نموذج يقترحه في قضية التكافل والأوقاف. التكافل في هذا السياق الذي يتكلم عنه المحاضر هو التكافل بمعنى التكافل التعاوني التأميني، طيب، وليس التكافل بمعناه العام. فأحببت حقيقة قبل أن يبدأ، خشيت أنه يذكر كلمة التكافل أكثر من مرة فيكون السياق مختلف. التكافل مفهوم العام، مقصود في التكافل اليوم في حديثنا هو قضية التكافل بمعنى اللي نسميه احنا في السعودية التأمين التعاوني، طيب، على أساس تكون الصورة واضحة. نسميه في السعودية التكافل التعاوني. فهو سيتحدث عن قضية كيفية ربط التأمين التعاوني بالأوقاف. هذه هي الفكرة الرئيسية التي سيتحدث عنها المحاضر. وسيذكر نموذج ابتكره ويكتب فيه الآن كتاب في هذا الموضوع، وهذا النموذج لشركات التأمين التعاوني أو التكافلي في التمويل الإسلامي، يصطلح عليها بالتكافل. فأيضا سيتحدث في هذا السياق. فلذلك سنأخذ معه 45 دقيقة 45 minutes German. Then بعد ذلك سنأخذ الأسئلة. بعد إذنكم الأسئلة والتعليقات والمداخلات ستكون بعد ذلك. عندنا نرجو أن تكون جميع المداخلات مكتوبة، حتى اللي يرغب في مداخلة صوتية يكتب لنا اسمه طلب مداخلة صوتية، سأرتبها حسب الأولوية. الذي يصلنا أولا سوف يكون هو المعلق أولا. التعليقات على نوعين. بالنسبة للتعليقات الإثرائية العامة أو الأسئلة العامة ستكون هذه التعليقات لها دقيقة ونصف. التعليقات النقدية التي تنقد النموذج وتعترض عليه سيكون لها دقيقتين. طيب، أو تحاول أن تعدل عليه، أو أن تكون متخصصة إذا كان عندنا أحد من المختصين في التمويل الإسلامي أو التمويل الوقفي أو غيره. فهذا باختصار طريقة إن شاء الله تعالى إدارتنا للقاء. والآن يتفضل السيد جيرمان بإلقاء المحاضرة. So you can start now with the first slide. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. No one familiar with Waqf could fail to acknowledge its importance as a concept and resilience as an institution. Waqf as an institution stands out as one of the major achievements of Islamic civilization, which has provided throughout history a myriad of the essential services such as health, education, municipal, at no cost whatsoever to the government.
Let me translate, please. يعتبر التكافل في الإسلام عفوا مؤسسة التكافل في الإسلام هي فكرة قديمة، وهي تقوم على تقديم المساعدة للمحتاج، وتتعلق أيضا في تقديم هذه المساعدات في مجال التعليم، في مجال الصحة، وفي مجال أيضا العمل الاجتماعي.
Okay, I shall continue. Takaful is a time-tested institution with its long history, has made a deep and significant impact well beyond Islam and the Islamic world, and one which, as argued by the former president of the International Center for Education in Islamic Finance, Daoud Bikari Abdullah, has a great spiritual and economic potential, among other things, to eradicate urban poverty. Nevertheless, it is essential not to get carried away with grandiloquent statements and wishful thinking. The institution of Waqf may be a very useful tool, but it is not, neither is it meant to be, a panacea. Waqf is not here to replace the role of the modern state, appealing to a glorious past. As Timur Kuran has pointed out, the Waqf system lacks the flexibility necessary for efficient resource utilization, proving unsuitable to the relatively dynamic economy of the industrial age. In the same manner, it is important to acknowledge recent developments in the Waqf institution that provides it with the flexibility it traditionally lacked. It now enjoys juristic personality, which means that it can sue and be sued as a legal entity. Another major reform is that the modern Waqf is overseen by a board of mutawalis endowed with powers similar to those of a corporate board of trustees. In this light, my aim in this paper is modest, but I believe relevant. I aim to test whether there is a role for the Waqf in a modern economy, or looking at the other side of the coin, whether the private sector can be up to the challenge to employ Waqf for social entrepreneurship. More specifically, I will focus on the potential relationship between Waqf and Takaful, i.e. Islamic insurance, for social purposes, and the extent to which this alliance can satisfy at the same time both Sharia-compliant criteria and regulatory requirements that characterize contemporary financial services. Takaful is a capital-intensive industry. Waqf has to have a charitable purpose at all times. It would otherwise cease to be a Waqf. So, can this marriage work? To answer this question, I shall provide a description of Waqf in the Islamic legal tradition and of a Takaful undertaking according to current regulatory parameters. I shall advance the model of a Waqf general Takaful undertaking I will then discuss the proposed model, my proposed model, and certain fundamental related issues surrounding it. I will conclude by making some final considerations. Sorry, just. Yeah. The Hanafi School of Law defines Waqf as the detention of the corpus from the ownership of any person and the gift of its income or usufruct, either presently or in the future, to some charitable purpose. The corpus, i.e. the Waqf properties, is relinquished by the founder, but it is not acquired by any other person. It is said to be arrested or detained. The beneficiaries, while not the owners of the Waqf property, have a legal interest in the usufruct of the Waqf itself. 4 basic conditions of validity govern the Waqf. It is required to be irrevocable, perpetual, inalienable, and to have a charitable purpose. Once the property is declared Waqf by its owner, i.e. the Waqif, the Waqf thereby created becomes irrevocable without any need to deliver possession to the beneficiary. The Waqif may retain certain rights as to the management of the Waqf, but the endowment itself is invalid unless it is irrevocable. 2, the Waqf is perpetual. The specific object of the Waqf does not need to be permanent. However, if said object ceases to exist, the Waqf income is applied to a similar charitable purpose. What is intended is the perpetuity of dedication and not necessarily the perpetuity of the object. 3, the Waqf is inalienable. The corpus cannot be the subject of any sale, disposition, mortgage, gift, inheritance, attachment, or any alienation whatsoever by the Waqif or the Mutabali or their heirs. 4, the Waqf must have a charitable purpose. The intention behind the creation of a Waqf is the performance of good works pleasing to Allah. This is a sine qua non condition without which the Waqf would be void. The Waqf, throughout its history, has commonly been used to endow mosques, schools and universities, hospitals and other charitable institutions where the beneficiaries have a right to be as informed as the Mutabali regarding the provisions of the Waqf instrument. Once a Waqf is established, its preservation and sustainability become paramount. Sorry. The Takaful undertaking as a tool for mutual assistance. Article 2 of the Takaful Act of Malaysia 1984 defines Takaful as a scheme based on brotherhood, solidarity, and mutual assistance, which provides for mutual financial aid and assistance to the participants in case of need, whereby the participants mutually agree to contribute for that purpose. In turn, the Islamic Financial Services Board defines a Takaful undertaking as a group of participants who agree amongst themselves to support one another jointly from the losses arising from specified risks. In a Takaful arrangement, the participants contribute a sum of money as a tabarruk commitment, i.e. a contribution in the form of donation, into a common fund that will be used normally and mutually to assist the members against a specified loss or damage. In the light of the above definitions, the participants in a takaful undertaking become so only on the basis of contributing a sum of money, however small. If there is no contribution by them or on their behalf, a person cannot become a participant. This monetary contribution is in the form of a tabarruk commitment, i.e. a donation. This is important given that the participants in a takaful scheme structured around a waqf fund will probably not be able to make a full contribution. However, they must make a contribution, however nominal in value, to be classed as a participant. In a normal takaful undertaking, the level of contribution that a participant has to make is the result of a rather complex actuarial formula, the aim of which is to meet and preserve the solvency ratio requirements. The participant risk fund, and here I'm using the language used, the concepts used by the Islamic Financial Services Board, has to be funded at all times to allow the takaful undertaking to meet all claims as they arise. As a rule of thumb, a newly set up general insurance undertaking takes around 4 years to break even. Given the capital requirements, the cash flow in the initial period is one way, i.e., there is a lot of investment and expense, there may be some income, but certainly there are no profits. In a waqf model, the level of participant contributions not met by the participants will have to be met by the takaful operator and other donors. Such potential demands over a long period of time will have to be taken into consideration by a takaful operator prior to establishing a waqf fund. Given the relatively small contribution made by the participants, any break-even point may have to wait longer than the 4 years I mentioned. This is an issue that would undermine the viability of any venture, not to mention a venture of this type in a heavily regulated industry. Nevertheless, the long-term aim of a waqf-based model takaful undertaking ought to be a viable concern in its own right, independent of the takaful philanthropy. Any deficit thereafter, in the event there is one, would be obtained as a zakat hasan from the takaful operator and or other sources. Not yet. The waqf general takaful undertaking, advancing a waqf takaful combined structure. This is the purpose now of the next section. A waqf general takaful undertaking, matching waqf and takaful in a marriage between entrepreneurial and philanthropic purposes, should meet the following features. A waqf fund is established from the initial donation of seed money by the takaful operator, which is a limited liability company. 2, and you can see the numbers there, donation of seed money if the capital donated by the takaful operator is not sufficient to reach the minimum regulatory capital, and or operating capital by one or more donors different to the takaful operator. My model assumes not only that there is one donor, but that there are other donors, but there is only one takaful operator. 3, the participants that have to make a contribution, however small, pay those contributions into the participants' fund. 4, the participant fund is channeled into the participants' risk fund, i.e. the tabarru account. 5, the funds in the participants' risk fund are donated by the participants to the WAC fund. The WAC fund is divided into at least 2 sub-funds: the underwriting fund and the investment fund. The WAC investment fund is invested in Sharia-compliant asset investments. 7, the investment profit, if any, as and when it is generated 4 or 5 years later, and thereafter, is returned to the WAC underwriting fund. 8, the wakala fee is paid to the takaful operator out of the WAC underwriting fund. The fee, which consists of any agency commission and administration expenses, is channeled into the takaful operator's shareholders fund. And 9, at year end, the surplus, after deducting claims, retakaful, and reserves in the WAC fund, will be retained in the WAC fund itself. Discussing the proposed model. Takaful operator as Wakif is essential or just necessary? Regardless of what model is adopted for a takaful company, what seems to be an immovable fixture in any analysis on the subject is the figure of the takaful operator. However, the Islamic Financial Services Board clarifies at the end of its definition of takaful undertaking that in principle, it could be a pure mutual structure. In other words, a takaful undertaking need not outsource its management. In a seldom referred to footnote, the Islamic Financial Services Board adds the 2 reasons that, in its view, explain why pure mutual structures are not normally used. First, they are not recognized, it says, in a number of countries' legal systems. Second, and from my point of view, more fundamentally, a newly formed mutual insurance company would hardly be able to meet the capital adequacy requirements that are now standard. It is thus clear that the takaful operator is not an indispensable feature of a takaful undertaking. The existence of the takaful operator is not a Sharia requirement. It is rather the product of a business model which owes more to necessity than to best practice. The above consideration takes on greater importance when discussing specifically the WACF model in a takaful undertaking. The pure mutual structure is the closest to a waqf and vice versa. This could be a takaful undertaking. There is no need for a waqf fund and a takaful operator differently. If it was possible for this structure to meet the regulatory requirements in terms of solvency, this would be as good as any model that exists. Perhaps, from my point of view, even better. The pure mutual structure is the closest to a waqf and vice versa. One, the participants, i.e. the beneficiaries, are the owners of the waqf mutual fund, and they are one and the same. Two, the objective of both is not to profit, but to benefit the participants. And three, to the extent profits are generated, these are not distributed but reinvested. The two obvious differences between a classic mutual structure and a takaful undertaking are that, one, in a pure mutual insurance structure, management and underwriting are done in-house by the same legal entity, and two, a mutual insurance undertaking is not obliged to invest its assets in Sharia-compliant instruments. But investment in Sharia-compliant instruments does not require the existence of a takaful operator. In other words, the existence of a takaful operator does not make a takaful undertaking more or less Sharia compliant, nor is it the result of best practice. I.e., it does not make said undertaking more efficient or more prudent. The existence and the role of the takaful operator have more to do with the difficulty of raising the required seed regulatory capital and maintaining the required solvency ratio. Therefore, accepting that there will be a takaful operator, and here from now on I'm accepting that, okay, this is where we are, we have a takaful operator as part of a takaful undertaking. The question is how this should work if there were a waqf fund. It is interesting to notice that in its stock-taking exercise, the Islamic Financial Services Board confirmed that the most frequently used models are the Mudaraba, Wakala, and the Wakala-Mudaraba combined models. In other words, the Islamic Financial Services Board does not include in its governance guidelines the waqf model. It does not mean that the waqf model is not financially viable. It suggests, however, that the other models are more financially interesting and or rewarding to the takaful operator. And herein lies the challenge referred to above. Who chooses the model to use, and who should be the primary beneficiary of any model adopted? Sources of funds. One thing that seems to be taken for granted in a lot of literature on the topic is that a waqf fund in a takaful undertaking has only two sources of funds: the participants and the takaful operator. There is, however, nothing anywhere that prescribes that a waqf fund should or could not receive donations from other sources, i.e., have other donors different to the takaful operator. The development of waqf from being the product of a donation of exclusively immovable property to cash waqf to corporate waqf opens up a plethora of opportunities and alternatives. A WAC fund may now be the recipient of donations from a multiplicity of donors different to and in addition to the participants, not to mention the takaful operator. Given that there is a takaful operator, which is not only a donor, but also the manager of the WAC fund, we need to think of an appropriate commercial structure for that relationship to occur. The single criterion to adopt is that model which allows the long-term preservation of the WAC fund. In a takaful undertaking, as in any conventional general insurance company, the most important thing is the welfare of the technical reserves, i.e., the capacity of the takaful operator to meet claims as and when they arise. Therefore, the management model to adopt is the one that siphons out the least amount of capital from the WAC fund. In this context, and for the reasons explained later, the Wakala model may be the most appropriate. In this light, we need to dissect each one of the elements in turn, making up a combined Wakala-WACF model general takaful undertaking, with a view to establish the nature and size of the challenge. The aim in a WACF model is to ensure the sustainability and viability of the WACF. In the context of a takaful undertaking, the takaful operator provides two functions: management and underwriting. Underwriting, i.e., the insurance services, include product development, the preparations of the insurance policy, the collection of contributions, the assessment of claims, and the distribution of compensations. That is the underwriting side. The management services include the management of the investment funds on either a mudaraba, wakala, or WACF basis. The WACF model in the context of a takaful undertaking resembles in almost all features a mutual insurance company. However, for the reasons explained earlier regarding the difficulty of meeting the capital adequacy requirements, a mutual insurance company structure is not a viable option at inception. By the way, that statement by the Islamic Financial Services Board is yet to be tested. The IFSB does not make that assertion on the basis of knowing that that is not going to be possible. You're saying that it would be very difficult. To ensure the long-term sustainability and viability of a general takaful undertaking, the most important task is to ensure the health of the technical provisions. Therefore, the optimum structure is that which allows the WAC fund to retain the largest amount of capital. The Wakala model, at first sight, meets this requirement to the extent that the takaful operator, as wakil, receives a fee for its services and nothing more. Schematically, it works as follows. 1, there is a principal-agent relationship, i.e. the WAC fund is the principal and the takaful operator is the agent. 2, the wakala fee is paid out of the contributions made by way of donations into the WAC fund. 3, the level of the wakala fee is agreed upfront and must be expressly stated in the contract between the parties. The criterion upon which the fee is calculated may be, for example, a percentage of the contributions. 4, the wakala fee consists of 1, management expenses, 2, distribution costs, including intermediaries' remuneration, and 3, a margin of operational profit. There is no objection to the takaful operator being paid for services rendered. Further, the takaful operator is entitled to recover its expenses and costs incurred in providing those services. And arguably, the takaful operator may also be entitled to a reasonable, under the circumstances, margin of operational profit, which should be included in the fee. But the fee should be all the takaful operator receives as a wakil. The takaful operator is not entitled to share in the distribution of profits generated by the waqf, even though said profit may owe, no doubt, something to the investment skills of the takaful operator. Perversely, some have argued that the wakil may need to be given a performance incentive, as if the fee were not sufficient. Were this not bad enough, some argue that said incentive should come out of the underwriting surplus. To put it bluntly, if the takaful operator wants to make money for its shareholders, and the takaful operator is perfectly entitled to do so, then the takaful operator should be well advised to put its money into a different venture. The takaful operator, however, cannot make a donation to establish and or to develop a waqf fund expecting to profit from it. All profit created by a waqf fund belongs exclusively to the waqf fund, and its use is for the benefit of the beneficiaries as per the waqf instrument. Furthermore, the reason to opt for a waqf model in the first instance is that the beneficiaries are, by definition, unable to make a contribution expected of a participant if we were to adopt a different takaful undertaking model. Were the participants able to meet the expected contributions in accordance with underwriting standards, there would not be any need to structure a takaful undertaking around a waqf fund. The literature on waqf tends to praise very highly the role of the waqif. We are told that the natural tendency among the Muslim rich is to do good deeds, whilst either completely ignoring the beneficiaries or looking at them rather patronizingly as mere passive recipients. We can grant charity to poor people or assisting the unfortunate people, as if poverty were the result of bad luck or charity were something that could possibly substitute the question of social rights. The Islamic Financial Services Board, in its guiding principles on governance for takaful undertakings, has alerted to the existence of an uneven relationship between the takaful operator and the participants, which is characterized by information asymmetry and misalignment of incentives. In its paper on governance, the Islamic Financial Services Board aims to champion the governance of takaful undertakings in accordance with internationally recognized best practice standards. The Islamic Financial Services Board recognizes that a hybrid structure between a mutual, i.e. a waqf fund in this case, and a proprietary entity, i.e. the takaful operator, may lead to conflicts of interest between the shareholders and the participants. The Islamic Financial Services Board recommends that the takaful operator has in place a comprehensive governance framework appropriate for takaful business models adopted to define and preserve the independence and integrity of each organ of governance. The rationale behind this recommendation is that the takaful operator, as wakil or mudarif, has considerable discretion. The takaful operator, for example, initiates and manages the takaful scheme, including determining the range of products, pricing, terms and conditions of each contract, etc. And there is no clear mechanism by which the participants can control, influence, and/or sanction the behavior of the takaful operator. The participants lack the power or information to monitor and control the takaful operator, thereby the information asymmetry. The Islamic Financial Services Board proposes a balanced approach that considers the interest of all stakeholders and calls for their fair treatment. The governance structure to be put in place shall represent the rights and interests of all stakeholders, including the participants. This obviously includes the participants in a WACF scheme-based takaful undertaking. Further, the IFSB recommends that a governance committee is established and that it includes 1, an independent non-executive director, experienced and able to contribute. 2, a Sharia scholar. 3, an actuary. And it adds that any increase in membership is to be made up of independents. Said independents, I would argue, need to include at least 1 representative of the participants. The more effective checks and balances are inserted into the system, the more likely it is that the otherwise unbalanced relationship between the takaful operator and the participants and the risks attached to it are minimized. Traditionally, the parties to a WACF are the founder, i.e. the wakil, the trustee, the mutabali, the judge, i.e. the qadi, and the beneficiaries. The founder may appoint himself a trustee. As a wakif, the founder has considerable latitude in setting out the terms and conditions of the operation of the WACF, including the appointment or dismissal of the mutabali, 2, the selection of the beneficiaries, 3, the distribution of the WACF income. To the wakif and the mutabali's roles, we need to add the role as agent, i.e. as wakil of the WACF fund. The founder thus becomes an all-powerful figure with all the risks attached to it referred to by the IFSB, i.e. the fact that the relationship between the takaful operator, in this case, and the participants is a very uneven one in favor of the takaful operator. However, 3 relatively recent developments may act as effective checks and balances. 1, the WACF as a juristic person which may sue and be sued. 2, the power and composition of the mutabalis, now structured as a board of directors with executive powers, including the ability to alter investments and spending. And 3, the sources of finance, which now include movables such as cash and company shares. The WACF structure may become more flexible and responsive to the needs of its stakeholders, and the WACF instrument should reflect this. The era of the single, all-powerful wakif is reaching its twilight, and perhaps not before time. The fact that the sources of financing of a WACF may be both movable and immovable property open up an opportunity not only of multiplying the sources of funds, but also the number of parties in funding a WACF project. If the Board of Mutabalis procures representation for all the stakeholders, included but not limited to funders and beneficiaries, this may democratize the decision-making process by procuring efficiency and fairness. In the context of a takaful undertaking, This multiplicity of funding parties may contribute to minimize the conflict of interests that traditionally have marred the relationship with the takaful operator and the beneficiaries. This accords with the principles of and best practice recommended promoted by the Islamic Financial Services Board in its governance paper. And I conclude, we cannot underestimate the challenges facing a newly formed WACF-based general takaful undertaking to become a viable going concern in their own right. It is not a model popular with takaful operators, which legitimately seek a profitable venture for its own shareholders. As observed by Timur Kuran, the WACF system is no longer seen as the most reliable vehicle for sheltering wealth. In addition, modern governance standards demand professional, responsive, transparent, and fair management of both resources and stakeholders. Donating is no longer a matter of acquiring the right to manage, appoint, and set up investment strategies. It now requires being accountable to stakeholders, regulators, and government agencies. Many may not have an appetite to get involved in a venture of this type, but the need is there. On the other hand, a WACF fund may now be the recipient of funds from several sources and a multiplicity of parties, from government agencies to small crowdfunding contributors. The financing responsibility need not rest on a sole philanthropist. This undoubtedly opens up opportunities for financing a plethora of charitable ventures, which would find it difficult to raise sufficient capital. Ventures which would otherwise be unviable for lack of sufficient capital and a long lead prior to breaking even may now become viable as ventures financing in a shared responsibility, as a shared responsibility. I have deliberately dealt with a case in the highly regulated industry of insurance services to make a simple statement. If a WACF model can work here, it can work anywhere. Shukran.
Okay, thank you, German. You save 1 minute. That's great. شكرا لكم جميعا. الأخوان ما وزعوا أوراق فلذلك راح نبدأ بالأسئلة. إذا أحد عنده سؤال فقط يرفع يده وإحنا نجيب له الميكروفون سواء من الإخوة أو الأخوات، وأيضا الإخوة اللي عندهم بالعربي ممكن يسألون السؤال والمترجم يترجم السؤال. فنبدأ بالأسئلة طبعا لأن العدد قليل فلذلك حنبدأ بسؤال سؤال والإجابة عليه. طيب تفضل زميلنا هناك. بس إذا تعرفون بالاسم تكرما.
السلام عليكم. عبد الرحمن باشيخ أوقاف سليمان الراجحي. I'm wondering if the researcher is assuming that the waqf, as per the modern structure of waqf, has limitation in terms of diversifying its investments outside the normal way of investing. For example, what the researcher is proposing here, as I understood, is a formula where the waqf is able to invest in social projects such as takaful, but the current practice now is that the waqf is able to invest in venture capitals, in social entrepreneurship, where the waqf is actually achieving multiple targets. One is actually promoting the entrepreneurs and their projects, while achieving the social objectives that the Waqf is actually established for. So maybe I got the wrong picture, or maybe the researcher has a perspective that I did not fully get. Thank you.
Hear me now? Yes. Yeah, okay. What I have intended here is to create as difficult a scenario as possible by trying to marry Waqf into a heavily regulated industry, as insurances, as takaful is, okay? By saying, if that marriage can work here, it can work anywhere. But in this scenario, the Waqf fund is initially created by a large donation from the takaful operator. And the purpose of the Waqf fund is to benefit, what I had in mind, given this is an insurance undertaking, a takaful undertaking, is that charitable purpose would be to provide health services to the poor. Okay? In takaful, one rule is that the participants themselves have to make a donation to be participants. But that, given the fact that we're talking about a Waqf model, by definition, the participants who are poor people will only make a nominal donation. i.e., they will not make a contribution sufficient under a different model, like a Mudaraba model, for the Waqf fund to be solvent. Therefore, for some time, this Waqf fund will have to receive capital donations from the takaful operator and or other donors, because it has to meet regulatory requirements. However, one of the purposes of the Waqf fund in a takaful undertaking is, on the one hand, to provide underwriting services, i.e., all the services proper of an insurance undertaking, but also to invest monies not destined to the underwriting fund for the purposes of growing the Waqf fund. The investments here may be in ventures such as the ones that you have mentioned. But to be realistic, the size of the fund which can be invested to start with and for some years will be tiny, because most of the capital will be used for the purposes of ensuring that the regulatory requirements are met, one of which is, and the most important one, any claims from the participants are dealt with as and when they arise. Therefore, the fund comes in the first instance from a donation from the takaful operator. I don't know whether that answers your question.
طيب نروح عندنا السؤال الثاني.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for the lecture. I just want a question, then later on maybe we'll ask the other one. For the underwriting, when you say it could be in-house, what do you mean by underwriting first, and how it could be in-house?
It can be in-house because a mutual structure of an insurance company That's what it does. It does not require the participation of a different entity. Remember that the takaful operator is a limited liability company with its own shareholders. Okay? The purpose of the takaful operator is to be a good takaful operator, to be profitable, so that the shareholders' funds of its own shareholders grows. But in the case of a WACF, that's not going to be the case. Therefore, any takaful operator or the shareholders of a takaful operator have to think long and hard whether they can get into this venture in the first instance. Okay? But as the Islamic Financial Services Board acknowledges, this setup is there because that's what it has, how it has been structured. But it need not be that. It could be that within the WACF, so to speak, there is one entity which does not have different shareholders to the participants. A mutual insurance company is an insurance company which is owned by its own participants, not by different shareholders. And that the only things, according to the IFSB, that stops that from happening is that in today's world, the solvency requirements of a takaful operator are so large that it may be very difficult to start one such mutual structure from scratch. But it doesn't say it's impossible, and it certainly does not say two things: that it would not meet with regulatory requirements, or that it would not be Sharia compliant. i.e., the fact that a takaful undertaking is structured this way is not because it is a Sharia compliant, a Sharia requirement. It is not. I don't know whether I'm clear.
To some extent, it's still that usually underwriting is being taken by a third party. This is why the concern is how it could be in-house.
It can be in-house because that's how the insurance industry has worked. i.e., the insurance industry has very successfully worked on the basis of the whole thing being done in-house. The exception has been precisely these structures, but that are there, as I said, not because they are either a business requirement, a business obligation, or a Sharia requirement. Therefore, just like the IFSB, I accept that they are here. That's a given, but we need to think outside the box that it could be different. And the IFSB accepts that too.
بس عندنا السؤال الزميلي وبعدين نرجع مرة ثانية. إذا في سؤال عند الأخوات بس ينبهون.
First, muchas gracias for presentation. And I have two questions. First of all, can you explain the takaful in Saudi Arabia from the bank? Because we have different meanings about takaful is insurance. Second, also we can have the saving deposit in cash, and keep it in safe in other year. If you have, like in Saudi Arabia, all the companies should be have saving 10% of the profit and use it as saving. We can use this one in takaful?
Just starting with your last point, in a takaful undertaking, yes, but you can model it on a mudaraba basis, or a wakala mudaraba model, combined model, which is the most popular these days. No problem. But here, I'm injecting the point of the WACF fund, i.e., this is not going to be done on the basis of making profits for the takaful operator. The takaful operator, any takaful operator starting this setup has to do it without expecting any profits coming out of it for its own benefit. The benefit will remain here. Okay? Remind me again?
We have like different meanings of the takaful, the insurance from the bank. The bank is so the same Raj takaful, Sab takaful. Can you explain that?
Sorry, let me see if I understand properly. You're telling me that banks sell takaful products? Yes. Okay, two things. That is something called bank assurance, i.e., a takaful operator, a takaful undertaking, distributing its products using bank branches. Yes, and that is something I have worked myself on for quite a long time. It's a very efficient way of distributing takaful products, which otherwise, without the network of offices that a bank has, would not get to as many people as it does. But that is more to do with distribution efficiency, but it's not the bank itself that is the takaful undertaking. It's just a different takaful undertaking that may be owned by the bank, by the way. Maybe the shareholder may be the bank, but the takaful operator has to be licensed as a takaful operator, different. And there is an agreement between the takaful operator and the bank to distribute insurance products. Yes, and that is, if it happens in Saudi Arabia, it's fine. I mean, I know many countries where it happens, and that's a very good way of distributing takaful products in this case.
Okay. Sorry.
I don't think it is, no, it's not actually, on the contrary.
Okay. نروح للسؤال اللي بعده تفضل.
Thank you very much. Just to be short.
Yes.
I think what needs to be clarified is the relationship or difference between waqf and takaful. Especially for myself, I'm General Secretary of Prince Sita Abdulaziz Award for supporting, the entrepreneur of social works. In this case, see, I'm still confused regarding how can we apply such beautiful models in social field, especially for the award. If we want to say, for example, that this agency or this organization, he is the most probably to be number one for getting the award. Here you are talking about technical operating, am I right?
Talking about what?
Technical operating systems here.
But it can be a very real system.
Yeah, it's okay, but I mean, regarding the social field, when I want to apply in social field, especially most of our donators, most of our initiatives, they are, it's not intellectuals.
No, that's right. Yeah.
As I'm not saying like me or like you.
Yeah.
So they need to be, this model need to be simplified a little bit so they can be applied for a real social practice field.
You mean it has to be it has to be connected with the cause itself?
Whatever.
Okay.
Totally for example, here, let's just say, we can put a hospital. Mm-hmm. Let's call it a hospital. And in this, instead of calling them participants, I would call them beneficiaries. Mm-hmm. The reason I have called them participants here is because in takaful, for you to be compensated, you have to be a participant. You have to donate in the first instance. That's why, but just see it this way. For example, when I was doing this, what I had in mind was, as I said, a scheme to benefit poor people and students from low-income families for health services, particularly dental services, because I was thinking dental services are not something included even in Europe in the freely, universally in a health service. It's something for which people have to pay. And you're thinking, paying, for example, normally, I'm talking about Europe in this case, annually 500 euro for dental service insurance is something that no poor people, no student from a low-income family can pay. And we have two options. Either to say to these people, you will never have any dental service because you cannot afford it, or you can, and we are going to set up this scheme whereby the poor people in a city or in a neighborhood, etc., can benefit from it. That is what I had in mind when I put this model, because it's a tough model, i.e., if you, there are two heavily regulated industries in the world. The nuclear industry and the financial services industry. Those are the two most heavily regulated industries. Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Oh, fantastic.
Let's go to the next question.
وهذا شغال الآن؟
شغال.
أوكي. السؤال لأحد الإخوان بقول: ما هي طبيعة العلاقة بين المشغل وصندوق الوقف؟ من هو صاحب القرار في عملية تحديد الصلاحيات وحقوق الشركة؟ The relationship between the operator and the waqf fund, and who is the decision maker in determining the powers and the company rights.
Okay. This is something I spent some time talking about because it is very, very important. Historically, the Waqif would be an all-powerful figure. Okay? The Waqf instrument, in a sense, would translate the fact that although the property was no longer that of the Waqif had just about all management power in a Waqf fund. Today that's not possible, and that's not desirable. Here, in this particular model, undoubtedly, the takaful operator would remain a powerful entity because it is the one and only that is licensed to be a takaful operator. However, if we adhere ourselves to the governance guidelines from the Islamic Financial Services Board, which says in order to create some balance between the takaful operator, in the relationship between the takaful operator and the participants, you need to have independent people on the board of mutawallis who would include or should include at least a Sharia scholar. But other of those people could be other donors. But in any event, there needs to be representation from the participants, apart from finance people, people who understand how an insurance undertaking, takaful undertaking works, but who are different to the takaful operator. Okay? That is my version of how this would work based on the governance guidelines put forward by the Islamic Financial Services Board. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Okay, so just we have 10 minutes left, so we have to manage it carefully. So we have 3 questions, quick questions. The first question is here, the next question in the female section. Then we'll back here, and we need the short focus answers.
Okay.
Okay, so let us start with it.
Thank you so much. Mohammed Swaidan. Thank you so much for the beneficial talk. I will have 2 questions. I'll reduce one now. So I'm going to ask about the worst case scenario. If the Takaful company goes to liquidation, what the status of the Waqf fund?
Well, the worst case scenario, that's why the Takaful operator has to think long and hard about it before it actually plunges into starting a Waqf fund, is to make sure that there is sufficient capital that the Takaful operator can put into it, not only to start with, but for some time until it breaks even. Okay? Because this is a capitally heavy industry. The break-even point in a normal Takaful undertaking, general Takaful undertaking, is about 3 to 4 years, 4 years. Okay? Before that, there are no profits. In a general Takaful undertaking. Normally, this is a rule of thumb. I mean, some can come beforehand, some can come after. But in the case of the Waqf, just almost by definition, it's going to be longer to get to that break-even point.
Maximum 4 years?
More than 4 years, I would imagine. Therefore, this Waqf fund will rely heavily on the further donations from the Takaful operator and other donors. The more these donors are able to put here, the quicker the break-even point is met. Okay? Because unfortunately, the help from here is not going to be great. Okay?
Okay.
Does that?
Okay.
We can talk later. If you
Okay,
want.
let us take the next question. تفضلوا.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This is Hind Al-Khayyat. I'm a consultant, administrative consultant. Thank you so much for this informative lecture. My question is related more to the risk and sustainability in this model. You explained well how this model is working in a consistent way. But I can see here direct risks coming from the investment. So my suggestion is that if you can modify that kind of risk that's coming from investment and make it goes to the participant risk fund instead. Yes, the profit number 6, instead of going back directly to Waqf, it should go back actually to the participant risk fund, because you cannot guarantee that the investment is really having revenues. Maybe you are losing in that investment. So instead of taking from the Waqf itself or losing from the Waqf, just make the arrow goes to the participant risk fund. This is my suggestion.
Sorry, I will think long and hard about your suggestion. However, 2 things. Remember, the Participants Risk Fund is the Tabarru Fund. This either stays here, but it cannot go back here.
Definitely.
Okay?
It will go to the Waqf.
It would go to the Waqf.
Yes, but what if you don't have a profit from that investment? Then you are going to lose the money that you took it from Waqf. That's why any loss, it should go as well to the participant risk fund. So it will go again to the Waqf. Get my point?
Yeah. In Takaful undertakings, the way they work is in this way. In other models, not the Waqf model, in other models, the Takaful operator is managing and the funds on the basis of a Mudaraba Wakala model, and on the basis of the Mudaraba, the profit would be shared between the fund and the Takaful operator. That's how the Takaful operator would get paid for managing the investment fund. And for managing the participant risk fund, the takaful operator would be paid as a wakil, a wakala fee. Okay? But here, in the first instance, if you look at other models, other diagrams regarding this model, what I have seen, and I have been, I must say, surprised and appalled, is that the profit is shared between the WAC fund and the takaful operator. And I'm saying that cannot happen under any event. Okay? But what can happen, and I'm going to think more about your suggestions, is that in the WACF, in the contract between the WACF and the takaful operator, the proportion that goes into the investment fund grows with the years. But in the first instance, the highest proportion, and for some time, has to go into making sure the sustainability of the WAC fund. I don't know whether that answers your question, but I will think about your suggestion for sure.
اوكي سوري بس سوري just a moment بس معلش تسمح لي على اساس لانه الوقت عندي خلاص باقي دقيقتين وفي واحد طالب مداخله اخيره فبعد اذنكم بس نقفلها وبعد كذا ممكن حتى انا والله عندي 3 اسئله بس لان الوقت لازم اديره بشكل جيد. باقي السؤال الاخير.
A suggestion and a quick comment. One suggestion is that if you would like to add a table to the presentation, just summarizing the gains and the commitments of each of the parties of this model. That will really help understanding the concept. The second thing is that in this model there seems to be a kind of separation between what actually constitutes a takaful structure, which is the company, the shareholders, and the participants, who are usually the clients who pay the policy, the annual policy premium. As per SAMA, 10% of the net profit should go, not the surplus, the net profit after everything, 10% should go to back to the participants, 90% should go to the shareholders. As per Sharia, all the total net should go back to the participant funds. So I wonder how this model would accommodate these kinds of regulations.
Yeah, in other models, when there is let's differentiate between profit and surplus, because it's important. In other models, when there is a surplus in the WAC fund, the best practice is not for that to go back to the participants. Supposedly, what they did was to donate. But the way in which they would benefit is that their donations in future years would be reduced. Okay, that is the way in which they would benefit when there is a surplus. And indeed, when there is, in other models, I'm not talking about WACF here, when there is a profit, the participants, particularly in family takaful, can benefit because part of family takaful is not by way of a tabarru commitment, because it goes into a personalized account. It's like a saving account, okay? But in the case of the WACF, it is a situation where my argument is that not only because of Sharia requirements, but particularly because of regulatory requirements, this fund will require a long time before it builds itself into a fund that would provide its own sustainability. That's the point that was being made there. Why to put all the eggs here when if you leave some here, you at least split the risks? And it's a good point, but in terms of regulatory requirements, the way in which the participants' donations reach the WAC fund is by way of donating the funds which have accumulated in the participants' risk fund into the WAC fund. They have to go into the WAC fund. They cannot stay here because then they are not donated. But as I said, this is a difficult scenario which I have deliberately created by saying this is a challenge. This is a challenge, but this is a challenge for entrepreneurship. This is a challenge for the private sector. Are you up to the challenge or are you not? And look, I'm not going to blame anybody for saying, look, this is just too complex and it has such a long lead before break even that I don't know whether I can make this long-term commitment to a venture of this type, particularly, as I said, in a financial services sector.
Okay. Thank you, German. I think we'll take the challenge. شكرا جزيلا لكم لحضور هذا اللقاء، ونشكركم جدا على الإثراء اللي حقيقة مهم جدا، لأنه هذا it's a new model ونموذج جديد. أعتقد أن الأسئلة اللي جت أسئلة كانت جدا مهمة، والإضافات أنه يعني يتم التساؤل حول الموديل لأنه تطبيقه من بيئة إلى بيئة يختلف، والأنظمة بالذات في القطاع المالي أنظمة مختلفة بشكل كبير من مكان لمكان. نستأذنكم الآن just we would like you to sit there German if you don't mind. في تكريم المحاضر من قبل رئيس لجنة الأوقاف بالغرفة التجارية في الرياض وعضو مجلس إدارة الغرفة التجارية.